have one of our favorite guests, Josh Kolsrud, prominent attorney here in town, joins us this morning because there are a couple of big legal cases that we are following, and we wanted to get his take on it as well. Josh, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Okay, thank you for joining us. We've got a massive legal win for President Trump. But I want to start with the Menendez brothers because my understanding is the hearing, the parole hearing, is underway right now. I'm going to roll some video. You know, this is a case that's been in the news for a very long time. Their parents dead. The boys at the time, or young men, convicted. And all these years later now, they might be looking at the possibility of parole. What is kind of your take on what's going on?
Yeah, so about a month and a half ago, the Superior Court judge sentenced the Menendez brothers again and allowed them to apply for parole. And in California, just like in Arizona, there's specifically a board of people that reviews whether or not it's relevant to release a prisoner. And basically what they have to decide is this prisoner a danger to the community? Are they a significant danger? So there are going to be arguments today for one of the brothers and arguments tomorrow for the other. And what they're going to be arguing is, you know, their attorneys, that they are not a danger to the community, that both brothers have been involved in different organizations within the prison system. They've essentially been model prisoners. They've received recommendations from correction officers, although Eric Menendez was caught with a cell phone earlier this year, and that may go against him in these proceedings. But remarkably, the victims' families in this case, the Menendez brothers' families, have by and large supported their release, and that's huge. So the parole board members are required to take in the input of the victims' families. And when the victims' families are recommending release, the probability that they are going to be released is so much more. So assuming that the parole board issues a recommendation for their release, which they probably will do, it'll be then up to the Governor Newsom, to decide whether or not he wants to do this. And Governor Newsom has issued what's called a risk assessment, where he has a psychologist give the brothers a Q&A based on the DSM-5 to determine what their risk level is to the community. And if they come back and say that their risk level is low, I fully expect that Governor Newsom is going to sign off on this.
You know, we've been waiting for details on what will eventually happen in this case since Thanksgiving, really. Since November, it's been in the headlines. What are your thoughts on how the family has been so supportive of them, even after what they were accused of doing so many years ago?
You know, victims and their families react differently to trauma. It's hard to predict. You know, in one scenario, you would have a victim's family saying, you know, no, we completely object to this type of determination. You know, I used to appear on parole board hearings all the time when I was a prosecutor. And that usually is the case, where the victims' families have had enough. You know, the murders in this case were so horrific, and it was premeditated, that, you know, it's hard to imagine that you'd want these two boys that, boys.
They were boys at the time, of the crime.
You know, to be released, given the brutality of the killings. But it appears that, you know, they've already had closure, and that they've, you know, forgiven them for what's happened. There's also an allegation that maybe the motivation was based on some type of abuse, some type of sexual abuse.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question, was because now that it's been so many years later, there are accusations of abuse by the parents on the boys, right?
There are, and it's what prosecutors term the abuse excuse, that, you know, your actions are excused if you can name some type of abuse. And we saw this in other cases, like the Jodi Arias case, where she claimed that she was the victim of domestic violence from Travis Alexander. And, you know, she said that the reason why I shot him 27 times and, you know, and stabbed him a bunch of times in the back was because of domestic violence. And here you have that as well.
All right, let's go on to our second topic, which has to do with it kind of came out of the blue, but President Trump, day after day, we saw him sitting there in the courtroom in New York. This appeals court this morning came out with a ruling. I don't know if you saw this coming or not, Josh, but after he was found liable in the civil case, the amount of the penalty was staggering. It was $500 million. So they say he's still liable, the court does, but they've thrown out the $500 million judgment. What's your take?
Yeah, so this 323-page opinion was massive. And what makes it unique is that it's what's called a plurality opinion, meaning that there isn't any one majority opinion that matters. So what they did decide was, the liability is still there, that Trump violated this statute. But they're saying that also the Eighth Amendment prohibits the Attorney General from levying excessive fines. And so there are a couple things about this decision that are really unique. Number one is the application of the Eighth Amendment in a non-criminal setting. You really haven't ever seen that before. And number two, you're seeing a New York statute being affirmed where it was used against an individual in a private transaction that really had no victims. And the appellate court upheld that and said, even though this is a novel way of applying the statute, we're still going to uphold the liability.
Okay. So, is that the end of it? At what point do we know, okay, you still have to pay, say, a $50 million fine? And what are the odds that he can get this whole thing overturned?
Well, there's certainly a chance that he could. So this case is going to be fast-tracked to New York's highest court. And I expect that there probably will be arguments at the end of the year with a decision in early 2026. Now, the plurality opinion that came out today had 5 different opinions about how they got to the conclusion that they got to. So the New York's highest court is going to be able to do any one of those things. And, it's anybody's guess what they will do. But here are the options. The court can say that the Attorney General overreached by applying this statute to the Trump organization the way that she did and just throw out the entire thing. Or she can say, or the Supreme Court can say, that the liability stands, but we're going to adjust the fine because we think it's excessive. Or they can say that the liability stands and we're also going to continue to levy the $463 million fine. So, it's anybody's guess to what they're going to decide to do at this point.
Wow. And time frame, just real quickly?
Yeah, I would say that at the end of the year, we're going to hear oral arguments, and then beginning of 2026 is probably we're going to get a holding.
Wow. Okay. Holy cow, Celeste.
Yeah, a lot
I don't know
happening.
about you, but Josh sheds so much light, answers all the questions that we have. That's why we love having you as one of our great guests, Josh.
Thank you, Josh, for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
It's good to see you, my friend.
Now, let's roll right